Okay, so I've seen this trend going around, and I wanted to hop in and participate and talk about my ins and outs of 2024. Even though it's the last week of January, there's still pretty much 11 months left in the year. And I'm going to talk about what's in for me and what's out. And there's been a lot of different takes on this, and I've been inspired by them, but these are just my personal takes. But if you have your own, let me know in the comments because I'd love to hear what they are. And it might be a little noisy in the background here. There's a lot going on, so sorry about that. So that's actually funny for a reason, but I just apologized, and that's one of my outs, but I'll get to that later. I want to start with the ins. So one of my big ins right now is slowing down and saying yes to less. And there's a few ways I want to slow down. One of them, I just said, is not filling up my schedule so much and saying yes to everything. And I know I'm a people person. I know I like to make people happy. I like to be around people. I like to be involved. But it's a lot kinder to say up front, I'm very busy right now. I don't have time to meet up. Or that sounds great. I can't join that weekend. And no, you don't have to do everything. And I really want to slow down as well by just not rushing through things, like focusing on quality, even and especially in when I spend time with the Lord and reading through scripture and prayer and really meditating on scripture rather than just reading a chapter and checking it off my to-do list. Another thing that's in for me this year that I'm really focusing on is actually my word for the year, which is courage. And I chose that word because it has been a consistent theme coming up in my life, and it really resonated with me. And I think courage looks like not being afraid what other people think of us and being bold and sharing our thoughts, but also sharing it with compassion and empathy and understanding and allowing room for growth and a conversation to happen when you're sharing or learning from the other person's opinion, but also be honest and sharing your own because you probably have a lot to offer. And I feel like I can contribute to conversations and share my insight while still respecting somebody else's opinion, even if I disagree with it. My third in for this year is creating, and this kind of become my mantra for the year, my catchphrase is creating rather than consuming. And I'm thinking of this a lot in the terms of content. I'm a professional content marketer. That's what I do for my job. And there's other aspects of marketing that I do as well, but I have taken on the side project of creating content for some clients and then also creating content for myself so I can practice. And I read this quote recently, and it talked about how the average person will watch 2 hours of Netflix a day, be on social or scroll for 3 hours and watch an hour of TikTok, and that probably ranges. But think of what you can do with all that time if you're creating and investing it in a side hustle or a side project, or if you're trying to create content. And that also applies to, oh my gosh, my dog. He wants to be involved. That also applies to so many other things outside of content. It could be with your house, or it could be with upgrading some furniture. I'm really trying to get thrifty, which I'll talk about when I get to my outs. And just creating something rather than needing to feel like, oh, you need to spend all this money all the time. Maybe you can make something, or if you want to be healthier, meal prepping services are great, but maybe it's getting creative in the kitchen and batching your own meals and saving some money. So the last in I want to say, which is I'm gonna have to push myself in, is I wrote down specifically piano, but also guitar. I was gifted one of these guitars, and then I purchased this guitar. It's more of a beginner guitar, and I really want to invest in music. I'm passionate about music. I love music theory. I'm not a great singer, but I do really love piano, and I've played that for years, and now I want to invest in that more and continue to play guitar with the hopes of, not just for myself really, but just getting better at it, but maybe it could lead to something in the future. We'll have to see. So these are my outs for 2024. And this is what I was laughing about at the beginning of the video, is apologizing. And I'm notorious for this. And I know a lot of people, especially a lot of women, fall into this trap of apologizing for everything and things we just do not need to. And there are times where you do need to apologize, where you were in the wrong, you need to show some character and apologize. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about doing something that just is normal, or like for instance, if you want to be courageous and share your opinion, you don't need to apologize for sharing your opinion. You don't need to apologize for like existing. You know, you can just replace it with words like thank you for your patience. You know, that often happens because we feel like we need to respond to things right away. We apologize, but we're busy and we have a lot going on, so we can say thank you for your patience, or things along. There's a few other replacement words I've come across, but really just assessing if we really need to apologize or not, and not making that our default. This is another one I'm really bad at, is getting into the minutia. And there are times where it's good to get into the nitty-gritty and the details, but I think I was just talking about this with my mom. I think what I tend to do is when I'm explaining an idea or a concept, I get really excited, and then that leads to one thing in my brain, and that leads to something else, and then it's like it's constantly evolving too, right? I have this idea, and then somebody gives me feedback, and then that makes me think of something else. So the ideas are always growing, which is good, but not great if you're giving a presentation to someone, or if you're just having a conversation. Sometimes those conversations are great, and they can go on for hours, and those typically are happening really deep friendships. You really connect with somebody, but sometimes those conversations are not great, or when you need to give people, you know, a 5,000 foot view of something, and just being more direct, sharing my thought and making it clear. And if I have different ideas, writing it down and journaling it, or leaving that for another time. Another out for me is trying to create perfect content, and that applies to both my business, my side hustle, my own content, and then the content I create for my 9 to 5. So that doesn't mean I do it carelessly. That doesn't mean I put mistakes or do it recklessly and don't try to make it professional. But I really think perfectionism is just such a terrible thing, because nothing is perfect. You know, there always could be something that's better, even if it's done extremely well. I had a coworker before talk about how we shoot for excellence. I think that's a great replacement for like shooting for excellence instead of an impossible standard of perfection. And that's what I try to do. And I love that analogy, or I love that replacement thought. What I was going to say is, and getting into the minutia again, what I was going to say is that I think that sometimes we really prevent ourselves from moving forward because we're so scared about making it look perfect, when we need to have grace on ourselves, understand that, you know, if we're just starting something, it's going to get better over time. If we're testing something, we learn from it, and then we learn to refine it and make it part of our process, and it becomes part of us, and that we're learning in that. And if you're so scared about perfection, I feel like you'll really prevent yourself from being really good at something, because you won't be afraid to make you'll be too scared to make mistakes. You'll be too scared of failing and of stepping out and learning from it, and ultimately from growing. This is another out for me, and I don't want this to be like it's not a hard and fast rule, but really television, and I kind of relate this again to creating more than consuming. I do enjoy sitting down and really making it a social event, and I'll give you an example. So my mom and I she watched for the first time The Chosen, and I love sitting down and talking about it. It just inspired really good discussion about scripture and Jesus and the disciples, and I do think the content we watch and consume matters, but I also think too, I just really, when I was consuming so much television, I just realized how much time I was wasting. And again, not a hard and fast rule, but I like to make it more of a social event if I can have a good discussion with somebody, or just really bond with somebody over watching a show. rather than watching on my own so much, or just limiting it and making it more of like a fun thing I do occasionally, because otherwise it just it takes so much time. The last out for me is gonna sound kind of, well, I said thrifty before, but not always, as much as possible, buying things at face value. I'll give you an example. So recently I need to buy a new pair of tennis shoes because my old ones were white and they were dirty, and this guy right here kind of chewed them up a bit. So I just kept looking, and I really believe in something called the boot theory, which is just like a quality, and buying poor products or cheaply made products really makes us poorer over time, because we're always having to constantly update it, rather than we just upfront invest in something higher quality. It would last longer. I really believe in that. However, I also believe in buying things secondhand. So one of my, I'm a big thrifter. I go to thrift stores here in town. Buffalo Exchange has been my favorite. Another Neon Cactus vintage is one I really like. I'll link these below. But I also do online thrifting. So I'll do ThredUp. I love ThredUp. I found these shoes. They were $17 less. They were the brand I wanted. They were my size. They were practically new. They were the style I wanted. I knew they were good quality, and I went ahead and bought that instead of buying a cheap pair for less online. So even though they would have been brand new. So I'm a big advocate for that. I also really like doing that with furniture and buying secondhand on OfferUp, and then fixing up the furniture I have. And that's one project I'll be working on this year. I know I'm going to do that with my kitchen table, my coffee table. And don't get me wrong, there's some things that you just can't do that for, but as much as possible, I'm trying to push myself to do that. So those are my in and outs for 2024. Like I said before, I would love to hear yours in the comments below. And honestly, I'm thinking about turning my content into more talking about content marketing, what I do, and advice for content marketing. So if you'd like to hear some of that, let me know in the comments below, and make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel and ring that bell notification so you don't miss a future one. I try to do these weekly, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye, Jack.